Today we're excited to have Kim Rush-Lynch here to talk about email newsletters, tips, and tools. So with that, I'd like to thank the sponsors as well as the collaborators on these webinars in the Women in Agriculture program. And I'm going to turn it over to Kim.
Thanks, Shannon. All right. So as Shannon mentioned, I'm with University of Maryland Extension, and I'm our Ag Marketing Specialist in Prince George's County. And I'm excited to be here today, and I'm glad to be the guinea pig for our new WebEx format. Today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about email newsletters, some tips and tools, and also just about their relevancy in general. First of all, a lot of people ask me all the time, are newsletters dead? Well, it kind of depends on what you're doing with it and what other formats of marketing you have to kind of leverage them. Many think that all you need is a blog and social media, but a lot of us really feel that it depends on a host of factors that we're going to talk about a little bit more today. But I really feel that a newsletter combined with a blog is one of the ultimate forms of marketing. So we're going to talk a little bit later about how we might do that. All right, so to kick it off, I wanted to chat a little bit about some interesting statistics regarding email marketing. First of all, a June 2016 survey of U.S. marketers conducted by the Direct Marketing Association and the Demand Metric found that email had a median return of investment of 122%, more than 4 times higher than other marketing formats, including social media, direct mail, and paid research. So that's quite a compelling statistic in order to, continue to develop your newsletters, or at least an incentive to develop your newsletters. Some other compelling statistics, we talked about how email is 4 times more effective in reaching your audience than social media, such as Facebook. More than 86% of businesses surveyed said they plan to increase their upcoming email marketing budgets. 3/4 of companies agree that email offers offer excellent, good return on investment, and it's reported that for every dollar spent on email marketing, an average of $44 return on investment is realized. So those are just some things to keep in mind. So why do a newsletter? Well, there's just some basic reasons, putting the statistics aside, including delivering important content to inboxes. It's a great way to get some valuable information to your customers. Social media allows you to do that, but unfortunately, because of the algorithms, you don't always get the same type of reach. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. The other thing it does is it attracts and retains existing customers. In terms of attracting new customers, we're going to talk a little bit about some methods of doing so. In terms of retaining existing customers, it's a great way to continue to just provide relevant information to them, let them know about some new and exciting things that are coming up with your farm business, any sort of innovations, community news, all those sorts of things, which are really, really helpful. It also helps you to build credibility not only with your clientele, but also just among your peers and in the industry. So I think it's a very valuable tool in that sense. It also helps you with developing your brand. And also just your vision and mission, helping to get that information out to the general public. And finally, it helps you with providing a venue for promotions, such as coupons, other promotions that you might be offering in terms of events that you wish to host. All those sorts of things are very helpful in terms of, getting that information to folks via a newsletter. And as we talked about, it's a great tool when used with other digital marketing channels, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, do I take the plunge? That is always the big question. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about today. We talked about how they can be very important tools, but you have to have the time for it, and you have to be consistent in order to make it worthwhile. Also, you need to ask yourself, do you enjoy creating content? If you don't, this is something that you may want to pass off to someone else. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It's just something to consider. The other thing you may want to think about is, have you identified your target market? If you haven't done that, then there's really no point in doing a newsletter because you need to very much tailor your newsletter, just like your social media and your other forms of digital or any communication, to that particular target market. Do you have a website or a blog and social media accounts that you can use to leverage your newsletter and vice versa? As I mentioned, that this newsletter is really going to help you if you work it with other forms of digital communications. So if you do not have those other ones set up yet, it's not to say that you shouldn't start, but you need to be keeping that in mind. And also, will you commit to responding to inquiries in a timely manner? I know you probably have seen before, it's very aggravating, when you get emails from a particular company and then you reply or respond and then you get something that says, oh, this is a no reply to email address, and it's very challenging to figure out how to get in touch with that particular company. Generally, with most small businesses, this isn't a problem. However, having said that, you don't want things to pile up in your inbox. So, making sure that you respond to inquiries in a timely manner is critical. You might want to reconsider, this venture if your time is really limited. You might just want to stick with social media for the moment or your blog, but there are quick ways of doing them in tandem, but again, if you have very limited time, maybe this isn't something that you want to take on right now, but you want to plan for in the future. Also, as I mentioned, if you don't have website or social media tools to leverage your newsletter to get the most bang for your buck, it might not be the right time for you. Some people really just don't want to include a professional email service in their budget, and there are some that are free, which are great, at least for under a certain number of subscribers, and there's others that you have to pay a little bit more for to get some additional services. But if you're not going to be willing to work some of that into your marketing budget, then also I would say it's a no-go, because there's a lot of newsletters out there that are competing for your attention, especially in terms of graphics and color and all those fun, attractive things. So an email news service or email newsletter service, I should say, will really go a long way to helping you look professional. And also, if you haven't taken the time to explore your audience, as I mentioned earlier, there's really no point in getting it started. Just at this point, start thinking about exploring your audience and figure out how you might use your newsletter down the road. All right, so again, consider who is your audience. Really take the time to identify your target market. This will not only be important to your email marketing efforts, but for your social media as well as other marketing channels, and it is well worth your time. And I know we've had other Women in Ag webinars that discuss this. Some of the, just a quick and dirty, some of the things that you may want to consider when you're doing your target market analysis and you're figuring out who your audience is. You want to look at demographics, and these are some examples of important demographics: age, income level, gender, geographic location, education level, and there's also psychographics that are really important, such, are there any particular special interests or activities that your customer base is interested in? Do they have any philosophical beliefs about farming or about the way their food is grown? There's, a variety of social factors involved depending on where people live, and same thing with cultural involvement. And also some people have other needs, such as they have health restrictions, and that might be why they're really interested in a particular product that you're offering or the way you grow your food. So those are important things to consider, when you are trying to identify your audience. This is kind of a great strategy. And I have a list of questions if anybody wants to follow up later on to kind of get your mind thinking about where your customers are, and I'm happy to share that. So now I just kind of wanted to go into some of the nuts and bolts of producing a quality email newsletter. There's a variety of content that you can use. Don't feel that you need to use all of them in each newsletter, of course. You want to mix it up. Be sure to include some short articles about your product or customers, keyword being short. You can have blog post links that in your newsletter that you can have someplace else, a landing page for more information later. So make sure that you keep those articles short. They should be little teasers. Photos. Photos are really a big part of any sort of newsletter. People like it to be visual. They don't have a whole lot of time to read. You need to have pictures that tell a good story. It could be pictures of some of your fans. It could be of your animals. It could be of products. So think about what kinds of compelling photos that you have available for your newsletter. Also video, is becoming more and more popular, of course. I feel like that's a really important piece of email newsletters now. And it could just be a link to something short that you did, on Facebook through Facebook Live, or maybe there's just a short video you uploaded to YouTube or on your phone. Those sorts of things are easy with a lot of these professional email services to embed right into your newsletter. Also, and an example right here, animation GIFs are really popular now, as you know, and a lot of people find them funny and amusing, so those are always fun to add to your newsletter, and they draw the eye down throughout the newsletter. Infographics, and we'll talk a little bit, more about those later and where you might, how you might create infographic. Podcasts, if there's interesting podcasts that you're listening to that's relevant to your product, you could, provide a link to that, tell folks what you've been listening to or what you've been reading. People always love coupons and discounts, of course. An events calendar is something that might be good to include. It may just be 1 or 2 events and you have a larger calendar that will be featured on your website or your blog. Resource links are usually helpful to people as well, so that might be something to consider for some of your newsletters. And again, that could be something that's directed back to your blog or your website, which is one of the key things that you want to do anyway with a newsletter, is drive people back to your website or your blog so they can take action. And recipes, people always love when we're talking about food. And of course, it's nice to include testimonials. You want to put information in there about, why people like your product and if they had a great experience at your farm. You want other folks to know that, because that information does travel. All right, so I mentioned some infographics, and I also wanted to mention, Facebook cover photos and Twitter cover photos, and also just graphics that you could insert into your newsletter. There's this wonderful application that I've used in the past called Canva. It does have a free version, which is wonderful, and then there's, of course, paid upgrades as with everything else. But it allows you to, pick a particular custom size, and it knows some of them for particular formats, like I said, like a Facebook event cover, for example. And it allows you to create a really fun graphic using your photos or some of their images and elements that you can easily pop into a newsletter or your social media. So I just wanted to mention that. And they also have what do you call it, templates for infographics, if you wanted to include some, specific information about a product that you might be offering. For example, nutritional information, something along those lines, but you wanted to display that information in a really interesting way. The infographic is a nice way of doing that, and I know we have previous webinars on that information. So in terms of creating compelling content, the thing you want folks to do, of course, is to, open up your email, first of all, and we'll talk about those catchy lines later, but you want to just make sure that the information there is relevant. And we talked a little bit about that in the previous slide, but I just want to kind of stress some other things that could be interesting for folks. Contests are fun, and that's a great way, especially if you do some sort of social media contest where people can use a particular hashtag. You can alert folks to that through your newsletter and, offer some sort of free product at the end. It's a great way, of course, for any important announcements or innovations that your business is doing. It's also a great way to market some of complementary businesses. If you are doing sort of reciprocal referrals, it's a great way to help other farm businesses that you're working with. And also, folks might be interested in a different, product that you may not carry, and it's always nice to, be able to go to you as sort of an expert, because they trust you and your product. They will trust some other folks' products, and then folks oftentimes will return that favor. Of course, anything funny, of course, within reason, is always good to include. People love, farm animal profiles, interesting facts on crops, along with photos. You can even include some of your more popular social media posts within your newsletter. I've seen people do that a lot. So, this is our Facebook post of the week, or, favorite Twitter post of the week, those kinds of things. And it may not be yours, it may be from another site too. I'm sure you guys have seen that. Anytime you can feature a happy customer, that is great. And of course, those industry news and trends is also helpful to folks, because again, they're looking to you as the expert. So if you're able to tell them, what's going on in your particular, area of farming, that would be really helpful to them to know, because most folks, you know, the average customer may not understand that. So it's really helpful to hear that from you. Even though it may not seem like news to you, it's news to a lot of people. And anytime we can better educate our customers, the better we are in terms of moving along the local food movement trend. So, all right, so email marketing services. These are just a few that are some of the more popular ones. I personally only have experience with MailChimp and Constant Contact. I use both of them, probably Constant Contact more so. The nice thing about these email marketing services is that they provide wonderful templates. They also provide, you know, formats for inserting images, video, your social media links. They just make it very easy to do a newsletter. You know, back in the day, folks really had to do this whole layout process, and it's very time consuming. Once you have a template ready to go, you develop a template, and some of these services will even develop templates for you, of course, for a cost, but they do have a lot of free templates that you can work with to customize for yourself. You know, once you have that together, it's really easy to pop things in and out. All of them on occasion may have some formatting issues, but those are usually fairly easy to work through. And I will say I've worked with Constant Contact and MailChimp, and they both have excellent, you know, customer service. I know folks that have used some of the others as well and have really enjoyed it. Some of it just depends upon scale and also cost and how much automation you want to do. So that would be, you know, if you have a shopping cart, for example, on your website and you want people to get, you know, emails back, or if you have a welcome letter that you want to send people automatically for signing up for your website, those sorts of things. And there's different levels, I guess, of automation. So, you know, it behooves you to spend some time, you know, looking through the various options. But I will say that MailChimp is nice in that if you're just thinking about a newsletter and you're not sure whether or not you want to go whole hog into it, MailChimp is really nice because it's free for up to 2,000 subscribers. And then if you were to decide to switch to another service later, you know, something that you thought was more robust, you know, and MailChimp is very robust. I will say it does a lot. But if you needed something, you know, different, you can always export, you know, into another program. They all allow that option. So just wanted to mention that. For most folks, I think starting out with MailChimp or Constant Contact, you know, is a nice way to go. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is hooking subscribers, how you reel them in through your e-marketing campaigns. So the one thing you need to do is to figure out how to grow your subscriber list. And there's just some really basic ways. Paper sheets, honestly, or postcard sign-up sheets that you would leave, say, at your farm store at a farmer's market. You can even, you know, just have a little clipboard and pen and pencil there, ready and waiting to go. Some people get a little fancier and they may have an iPad set up with the landing page already there ready to go for their email form, and we're going to talk about email forms through services like Constant Contact or MailChimp in just a minute. But also you can collect emails when customers sign up for an event. Like, you know, for example, I know Shannon is putting together a lot of events, you know, Annie's Project and Women in Ag. She's, you know, able to collect emails when folks sign up through Eventbrite and, you know, other registration services. You can collect emails at trade shows and other events very easily. You ask your current subscribers to share or forward your emails. A lot of email service providers will have that information at the bottom of the email or sometimes at the top of the email. But, you know, it doesn't hurt to ask folks, whether it's through your social media or through your newsletter, to forward and share to other folks that might be interested. A lot of people are offering some sort of informative downloadable document, and that's really helpful. So it could be recipes. It could be, you know, for you just how to use your product, and that's something free that you might offer to folks if they sign up for your newsletter. It might be a free T-shirt, or it could be that you offer, you know, free value-added product, something along those lines. But just, you know, keep in mind that it gets a little bit more cumbersome when you're talking about actual objects as opposed to some sort of downloadable document. A lot of the services also offer phone sign-up, so you can literally text a number to another number, and it will allow you to join, and it will take you through an email sign-up form that way. So that's something else you can ask folks to do. And I'm just going to pause for a moment and just ask folks out there if they have used any of these particular strategies, if they are doing email newsletters. If so, which has worked best for you, or do you have some additional ones that you'd like to share with the rest of the group? And we could use the chat box in order to do that. And if folks don't have anything, that is fine too. You can always share some more later. I'll just, keep moving in the presentation, but feel free to stop me anytime and use the chat pod. All right, so this is something that is very important that I've noticed a lot of folks don't do. Oh, we have something from Candace. Thank you, Candace. So she uses a spiral-bound binder at the market for people to sign for the newsletter. That's great, and that's nice that it's spiral-bound, so this way you keep it all together, because I know sometimes I use sheets of paper and then they get a little bit cumbersome. And Susan says they use primarily paper sheets. Oops.
I just want to say, oh, okay, you're saying that, great. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure you saw the other one.
No worries. It may be a little bit slower on my end. I apologize. Thanks, Brad.
Okay.
And Susan says they use paper sign-up sheets and it works well. Yeah, I would say too, especially at events and workshops. Sometimes the challenge with the paper sheets, and we find this because we do the same thing in our extension office, is you often can't understand people's handwriting. So that's just something to make sure, you clarify to people that, please print clearly. Some people will go so far with their sign-up sheets as to include boxes. Yeah, and I agree. I've used the text option for my own. I also used to have a health coaching business, and I used to use the text option, and that was kind of fun when you could get people to do it. So it's a nice way of doing it. Keeps things easy. But yeah, for most of us, we use that good old paper sheet, and that works just well. Just need somebody to enter that data for you. Oh, and Candace says she's also trained their cashiers to mention the newsletter. That's fantastic, and that is important to do. So in addition to talking about some of these digital ways to get folks to sign up for your newsletter, yes, having, places, telling people by, verbally, word of mouth, signs in your store, all those sorts of things are really important, and in order to get folks to sign up for the newsletter. All right. If you have other ones, just keep them coming in, and I can just pause and mention them. I don't know how many of you have email sign-up forms. I know that I frequently go to websites, and I know that they have newsletters because they've told me, but I can't figure out how in the world to sign up for them. So it's really important to have some sort of email sign-up form. Some people have a link, but it's not as noticeable, so I think having some sort of button is a lot easier. You can have someone design a graphic, or you could design a graphic yourself that has a hyperlink that will go directly to your email sign-up form, and I'll show you an example of an email sign-up form momentarily for those of you who are not familiar with them. And also here, Evermore Farm, they have a great email sign-up form too, and you can see there's a couple of interesting things here. First, Ginger indicates, keep up with the farm, get exclusive updates and tips reserved for subscribers only. And that's a catchy thing, and you feel like, okay, I need to sign up because I don't want to miss out on particular products that are coming up, and whatever recipes and tips that Evermore Farm is sharing. So you have that great button that says, yes, keep me updated. It's bright, it's clear, and also you can see that there's the privacy and spam verbiage there at the bottom that helps people too. So they know that if they pass along their email address to you, you will respect it and you're not going to send it to other people or over inundate them with emails. So it's very important to have a sign-up form. Now usually when you have these sign-up forms, it then goes to a particular form. This is an old one from my old health coaching business. But you can see you can collect all kinds of data. We'll talk a little bit about how much you should actually have in your form. We'll talk a little bit about that later. A lot of this you don't need. You can also indicate in most forms what is required. So for the most part, I just say your name and your email address is what's required, and that's it. I might have some other questions in there in case people feel like filling them out, because sometimes it's nice to ask questions to know, how did you hear about us? What sort of topics would you like to see addressed in the newsletter? You can definitely indicate that. But again, you want to keep it as minimal as possible so that folks will actually complete it and subscribe. If you make all of those fields required, then you might get folks that just drop off or say, I don't want to bother with it. And this is a great place to do a welcome note as well. And a lot of services, again, once you complete this, they're going to send you some sort of welcome email. And those are really nice to do too. And you can have additional information in there in terms of sending people back to your website. You can offer them a freebie, but just with your form, make it clean, minimalistic, professional. All you really need is your logo and maybe some links in there just to kind of remind people that, hey, yeah, I'm on Facebook and Twitter if you're new to me, or I'm on Instagram, those kinds of things. So it's a great way to sort of reinforce where you are in the cybersphere. All right. So the next thing I wanted to mention, so zip code for demographics. Yeah, actually, that is a nice thing that you can include too. So any sort of that demographic information that you want to collect, you know, absolutely put it in there. And most people, zip code is very easy to put in. So that's a great question, Peggy. So I would definitely, if you're able to do that, you know, you may or may not make it required. That's up to you. But I think for the most part, people would be okay with submitting a zip code. So that's a great point. Thank you for doing that. So where to place my sign-up form? The closer to the top, the better you are. Just want to let you know that also that the average email opt-in rate is 1.95%. Anything above that, and you're doing better than half the world. So it is small, the opt-in rate. So that is why it's really important to place your sign-up form in a prominent place. So sign-ups, you know, at the top of your, you know, above your navigation bar, or just anywhere near the top or the header is really helpful. Also the top of the sidebar. More folks are going with a feature box, so it's kind of like what we showed you prior with Evermore Farm. That's really, you know, it kind of helps that particular piece of your web page stand out. You want to reinforce it though in some other places, like in your About page, in your footer. Some people for a while were doing hello bars. I just sort of did an example. I just made one up. You can Google hello bar after this. But it's a banner that you've probably seen at the top of some websites or blogs, and it might say sign up and get our free guide to carving a whole chicken in 10 mouth-watering recipes. And then you click on the button and it will take you to a newsletter sign-in sheet and, you know, directions for folks cashing in essentially on your offer. A lot of folks are using slide-up bars or pop-ups, and I have an example of a slide-up bar to the right. Tread lightly here because depending on your audience, for some it's like, oh, great, they have a newsletter, you know, and you're ready to put your information in there. But depending on how folks do it, often people are aggravated, especially if you have that popping up among other things like ads. So, you know your audience. And, you know, it might be one of those things that you try and just see if it really does help with sign-up rates. You know, we're going to talk a little bit later about how you might track some of these things. But if it's not increasing your sign-ups, you may just, you know, want to eliminate that and just go with the feature box, which is always there. And some people can even make the feature box animate, that kind of thing, which, again, is one of those things that, depending on your personal preference, you might find annoying or you might find helpful. And a lot of times, folks will actually put a link to their newsletter at the end of a blog post. So that's another thing to consider. They use that postscript, that PS, and it's amazing how many people actually do look at the PS. They've done some studies around that. So that's another place where you could say, hey, you know, if you like what was in this article and you don't want to miss out, you know, sign up for my newsletter and I can let you know when my next blog post will be out. Because actually, your newsletter is a great way to aggregate your blog posts and let people know that you have new posts up. Because, you know, you might be looking at their website on occasion, or folks might be looking at your website on occasion. If they're really engaged, they are going to check your blog regularly. But folks are busy, you know, so it's nice to get that email to say, oh, there's something new, you know, and there's links right there. You don't have to go searching for anything. You just click the links within the newsletter and it takes you right there. The other thing that you can do on your social media pages is you can actually pin a post, which is really helpful. You can, you know, you could, you know, develop a campaign even, or you guys have probably heard about, you know, Facebook boosting, and there's something very similar in Twitter. And so you'll get a little bit more recognition, you know, with the Facebook algorithms, depending on how much you pay. You've got to pay to play. But you can pin that on your site, but then you can also promote it through a Facebook post, which is really, really helpful. So that's another thing that you might be able to consider, and just keep that at the top. And I'm going to show you some other things that you can do on social media to promote your newsletter in just a moment. Has anyone else seen any other interesting email sign-up form locations or interesting styles that they wanted to share? And I'll just pause for a second. Okay, we will move on. Feel free to interrupt, and I am happy to go back to that. So I just wanted to show you something that you can do, for example, on your Facebook page, and you can do something similar with Twitter. Social media apps are actually able to link your account to your email sign-up form. It's wonderful. You have to kind of look for the app, but they're pretty prominent. They're pretty popular. And here's an example right here. You can see in the left bar, sign up for Juicy News. And when you click on that, and you'll just have the regular Facebook feed, then this form automatically comes up. And you guys saw the form in the prior page, or a couple of pages ago. So that's something great that you can do right on your social media. And if you feel a lot of your customers are already there, and you also, when new people come through and like your page, it's nice to have that prominent. So you can actually move the, I guess the menu to the left, and you can move the newsletter up fairly high. I don't think it can go above, like the home or about, but it can be within the top 5. So you're going to make sure, you want to make sure that you do that. And that's the same thing with some of the, if you look to the right, the blue Contact Us button, you can do that. Some people also might make that sign up for my newsletter, but you want to do something either just to direct them to your newsletter or to your website. That's something really nice to do. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about how you can boost that email button. Some of the things that you want to do is use a form, as I mentioned before, not a link. You want to be sure to include a call to action. It can be join us, get this, don't miss out, make it happen, send me updates, all those sorts of things. You can just use subscribe, but for some reason it's more compelling, or the eye is drawn more to some other verbiage, because I think we're so used to seeing subscribe. That's something to think about. And these are just some examples. The one at the top, don't leave without becoming an MF insider, that's Marie Forleo. She does some great internet marketing, so she's a great one to check out, actually, and I have her website listed below, marieforleo.com. She has a great internet marketing course as well. So you can kind of look and see some of the things that she's done. She's got a lot of, blog posts and webinars too, just on internet marketing, so it's just a great resource. And then you can see over here, some people find it really helpful to share sign-up stats, because if you get a critical mass, you can say join over 140,000 of your peers, and people say, wow, okay, they have a lot of signups, so there must be some really good content. So that's something that you can do too. And again, you can see some of the information that they put in their sign-up box, like this one, get daily articles and news delivered to your email box, and get an exclusive email book, for example. So those are, some of the things, putting those offers in there, those promotions, and giving people an incentive to sign up. The other thing is, use simple typography, colors, and or eye-catching graphics. Some folks really clutter up their email form, or their whole website in general is cluttered up, and it's really challenging to see it. So you want to make sure it's bright, colorful, and it stands out, and sometimes it needs to be a bit more minimalistic for people to focus in on it. So I just wanted to share that. And a lot of these particular sign-up forms, again, they can be created through your email service provider, and oftentimes there are plugins for WordPress or whatever website that you're using that will function along with the email service provider. So that's just something that you can kind of work out on a case-by-case basis between the email service providers offerings as well as that of the whatever content management system you're using for your website or for your blog. Okay, so now I just want to talk a little bit about some best practices, including, engagement, just reviewing content, layout, the sign-up forms, and also list maintenance. Some of this will summarize points that we've already discussed, and some things will just, be additional points just to consider. All right, so again, just to kind of review, we mentioned, knowing your audience and selecting relevant material, create an email marketing plan, including a content calendar. A lot of people don't really create a content calendar, and that's something important to do. you know, if you're doing a monthly newsletter, for example, you want to look at each month and see, you know, what sort of things would be important or of interest to your client that particular time of year. And also, you know, they have, you know, different months that you can, you know, take advantage of, like National Nutrition Month, for example. You know, so you can really sort of target your campaigns around some of those things if they are applicable, for example, to your particular business, farm business. So definitely try to think ahead of time about what types of content you want to include in your newsletter ahead of time. And also, you know, be sure to personalize your emails. They actually say that the open rate for emails with a personalized message is 18% compared to 13% without any personalization. So, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, it's just basically, you know, there's a greeting box that you can insert through a lot of the email service providers that will automatically pull from the database that person's name. So that's something really simple to do. You know, always saying thank you, thanking your readers, you know, especially if you do a nice little letter at the beginning, very short, you know, just saying, you know, general things that are happening and what they can find, you know, in this particular newsletter this month, for example. And then, you know, again, thank your readers. Always thank your readers. Folks seem to really respond to that. Again, be as brief as possible. We spoke about that before. I know a lot of us get a lot of very long newsletters, and our attention spans are very limited these days, especially because we're bombarded with so much digital media. You know, they say really 20 lines max for a newsletter, you know, and just really include teasers, you know, in your newsletter with read more links that would post to a longer article on your blog, because there are some things that people are going to want to have a little bit more in-depth information on, but they're not going to want to sit there and necessarily read it entirely on your newsletter. So you want to make it brief so people can get through it quickly, see the content there, and then they can go elsewhere for more information. Again, being consistent, decide if your newsletter is going to be weekly. If you have a CSA, that might be a really good option for you. Monthly is probably more reliable for most people. If you're just getting started, you know, maybe quarterly, but I will say quarterly, you know, people forget about you a little bit more. So monthly, I think, is a good pace for most people, and just keeping it short, because the other thing that happens when you move to a quarterly newsletter is that you have a lot more content, and then, you know, people kind of lose you because there's so much information. Now, sometimes you have to have a longer newsletter because maybe you don't have a landing page for a blog post, for example. So in that case, I know sometimes I have to do an events thing for, you know, producers in Prince George's County, and it gets quite long, but that's because there isn't really another format, you know, for me to put that information. So, but people do parse through it because I put a table of contents in it if it has to be long, so they can look through that table of contents and figure out very quickly, you know, what things they want to look further in the news, down in the newsletter, you know, just to read more about and get more clued in on that particular upcoming event or issue that's happening in the county. Definitely include your social media links on your newsletter. Some people may forget that you're on social media, or perhaps they weren't on social media when they first subscribed to your newsletter, but they are now. So definitely include those in there. And include links to sample newsletters on your website or blog. If people are on the fence about whether or not they want to you know, subscribe to your newsletter, sometimes having an archive somewhere, you know, can be helpful to people, just so they can understand, you know, the kind of content that you're creating. And that could just be under a resource tab on your website or blog. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. Oftentimes these email service providers are sending, you know, HTML emails that are really image heavy, and as people do more imagery, this becomes more important. You have probably noticed that sometimes you have received an email and it looks completely blank because you haven't clicked the display images icon. So for that purpose, it's really important to use alt text. So that is when you are putting the image, you know, into your newsletter system, there's a little place where you can put some text to describe what that picture is. So just make sure that is really informative. So if all people see is that text immediately, that will draw them in and I guess make them go that extra step to actually display the images. Because sometimes people have some really great imagery or graphics, but people don't bother to take the time to display them. So just something to keep in mind. All right. So in terms of content, one thing that I mentioned to folks is please use a clear and catchy subject line. Oftentimes, people will just write it's my July newsletter. And unfortunately, that's not very interesting. So, trying to come up with some catchy and clear subject lines. Oftentimes what I'll use is maybe there's a particular event, that's happening that I think people would really like hook into. So you might use that as your subject line. Oftentimes there's, just a little funny saying, whatever it is. But sometimes using the word thank you in your subject line can actually increase your open rates. So thinking about that and doing a little bit of research would be really helpful. If you're able to test it, even better. Some folks don't really have time to do this, but a lot of your email service providers will allow you to segment your lists so you can sort of categorize people according to what they might be interested in. But you also could create sort of a testing category. So maybe part of your email list receives the email on Tuesday, for example, and perhaps there's 2 different subject lines that you want to test. So you would send that email to, say it's 20, for catchy subject title A, and then 20 for B, and then you get that information back, later that day, and then based on that, you can change your subject line for the rest of the email list based on which one is, I guess, more interesting to people and what had the higher open rates. A lot of people don't have time to necessarily do that. A lot of these things are done with, companies that actually have whole marketing teams that are able to work on this, but that is something that you can do. So if not that, something else you can do is, and I'll show you some of the reporting systems within some of the content or the email service provider dashboards. I'll show you that in a little bit. But sometimes you can just look at open rates as well and sort of compare and contrast, to see if more people opened with this type of subject line versus that type of subject line. So pay attention to those sorts of things. Explore a variety of content, as I mentioned before. Again, you don't want to have the same type of content all the time. There may be certain things that that your clientele really looks forward to every month. Of course, keep those sorts of things in. But feel like you can mix it up and change the formatting around a little bit, obviously with the same branding, because you want to make sure it looks like it's coming from you, just to help mix it up. Same thing, with the media, the podcasts, links to webinars, those kinds of things. And we talked about offering incentives and including that call to action. The other thing you're going to want to do is observe what other small businesses are doing. Sometimes that's really helpful. There is a website called reallygoodemails.com, that showcases some of the more popular, emails that seem to work well for, particular businesses. Not all of them may be relevant, obviously, to the food and ag industry, but you can still get some ideas there and kind of figure out what you even like so you know that you can emulate something similar. In terms of layout, again, I can't stress enough, if you can use a professional email service provider, that will go a long way to helping just make it less cumbersome for you and make it more enjoyable. Also, create simple, clean designs. Try not to clutter up. Some people try to fit so much information into a newsletter, and then people look at it and their head starts to hurt. So really try to keep it simple. And Susan has a question in terms of when the recording will be available. I believe tomorrow, but I will let Shannon, type in the box about that. Thank you for that question, Susan. You also, again, we talked about using images widely because people are really visually stimulated. They want to see, whether it's graphics, pictures, those animated GIFs, all those sorts of things. Make use of those automation services. It's really nice when you sign up for a newsletter to get a welcome email back. Thanks for joining. Here's, a free download, or, hey, here's a coupon for 10% off of our farm store. Those kinds of things. That just, just going that extra mile really helps with building customer relationships. Also, a lot of people are looking at your emails on their phones. You want to make sure you select a mobile-friendly template. And it depends on your target market. You may have more desktop opens. I know in our extension office we have more desktop opens than mobile opens, but we still have a fairly high rate of mobile opens. So you want to make sure that you are selecting a mobile-friendly template so that people aren't aggravated and taking their finger and trying to zoom in and zoom out of your particular newsletter, because then people won't read it. They'll just move on to the next thing. All right, so now the best practices sign-up form. I just wanted to talk again and kind of reiterate some of the best practices there. Again, having that email sign-up form on your website, blog, and or your social media is very important. And it could be sort of the same variation of it as well. I talked about including the welcome email with your offer, always directing users back to your website or blog, because that's the main goal, because you want them to go to your store and shop, or you want them to go to your blog and find out more information, or if you have a landing page of events, you always want to direct them back to the thing that you want them to do and how you want them to engage with you. Don't ask for too much info on your opt-in form. We discussed that because you don't want people to get frustrated with it or feel like, oh, it's too much to fill out, I'm just going to keep moving. Also, don't hide that email opt-in form. I've seen that too. People actually have one, but you just can't find it anywhere. Really make it visible. Call your updates or your newsletter something more interesting than newsletter. Really think about a catchy name. Like for example, The Buzz. If you're an apiary, it might be kind of a fun, catchy name for your newsletter. But just, someone says newsletter is not necessarily, quite as catchy. You can usually make some, or help work with a designer or yourself, even create a graphic that goes along with that. That would be part of that email sign-up form. Include a privacy statement, again, because people know that you won't sell their name and that you're really serious about keeping their email list just private to your particular organization. That makes a lot of people feel more comfortable. And also adding a link to your newsletter that allows your clients to unsubscribe at any time. Please make that easy, because there's nothing more aggravating than getting put on a newsletter, or you sign up for a newsletter and then you can't figure out how to unsubscribe. That gets very frustrating. So I think people are more likely to subscribe if they see that, okay, it's really easy for me to unsubscribe if I need to do so. Just another thought to consider. Another thing I wanted to touch on quickly were best practices for list maintenance. You want to make sure you clean up your email database fairly regularly, whether it's monthly or quarterly. Sometimes if you have bounces, and we'll talk a little bit more about bounces in a minute, sometimes that can go against your open rate, and it just kind of it's not necessarily a good thing in terms of your open rate, and also how internet service providers see you. Sometimes they think you're spamming people if you're sending out a lot of emails that are no longer used, or they're closed and that sort of thing. So you want to make sure you clean it up regularly and just take a look at those bounce reports. Frequently, an email service provider will have a reporting section, and in there they will tell you, okay, whose emails bounce back to you, and they'll let you know if it's a soft bounce, which it might just be their inbox is full at the moment, or a hard bounce where it's pretty much a done deal, just get rid of it because they probably have closed that email account down, or there's another reason why it's no longer in use. Also, you're going to want to reevaluate segments and lists for relevance. So at first you may not have segments, and that's okay, but eventually, as you grow your email list, you may find that there's going to be certain things that are going to be more interest to some of your readers than others. For example, some people just might really enjoy the content. They love what you do. They don't live close to you. They don't necessarily know about all of the events that you're having. So maybe you have a separate list for them, and then you have another one for events. That's just, kind of a random example, but thinking about what sort of segments are relevant for you. Some of them might be specific just to promotions. So you want to think about that. And also some of them may be particular aspects of your farm business. I mean, you may have, a lot of things going on. You may have a CSA, you may have a farm store, you might be doing some sort of agritourism component along with that. So people might be interested in particular aspects of your business. So that's really where segmentation can be very helpful. You also want to evaluate your email marketing campaign metrics, and we're going to talk about that shortly. And finally, I just want to mention, create a checklist of key points to consider before you press send. That is really helpful. And actually, some of this best practices section, you could even use that as a checklist. Make it simple. Just these are the things that I need to do and to be sure that I look at before I press send. One of the main things I will tell you is check your links. Most of these email service providers will give you a preview mode, or they will allow you to send it to yourself. Do that and really check the links. And it's really helpful to have someone else read it too, because sometimes we're working so closely on something that we don't even see, the errors anymore. I think we've all experienced that. So it's really helpful if you can have someone read it first if you have the time. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the email marketing metrics. This is not my favorite part, I have to be honest. And so these are some of the ones that I guess the industry in general looks at. I spoke a little bit about bounce rates, and I have some, some of the, I guess, formulas, you could say, for how you can calculate these. Now, most of the email service providers will calculate this for you, but if you're just wondering how they get these numbers, that's what this page is about. So bounce rates, click-through rates. So that's, how they, how many clicks through your email they have, because you might have particular links going back to your website or to your social media pages, so measuring how often people are clicking through. Conversion rates, so that is essentially if there's some particular action that you wanted them to take, how many people took that action, whether it's I want you to go to my website and look at this particular page. It could be purchasing something in particular. It could be I wanted folks to look at this particular event and purchase tickets. So, whatever that might be, that's what you would consider conversion rate, and that can be a measure of success. Email sharing and forwarding rate can be, some people look at that too. I guess that's interesting because if people think enough of your newsletter to share it with someone else, that's a good sign. List growth rate, how many new subscribers you have, compared to those that, of course, have dropped off or have sent you complaints. So you want to look at that list growth rate, and you want to keep that growing because you have to remember you need a lot of people in your email database in order to, actually get folks, a critical mass of folks purchasing your product or attending your events or whatever it might be. Open rates we talked about. Also, your overall return on investment for the newsletter, so that, you got to think about the time and money you're putting into the newsletter. And at first, it may not be so high, but you hope that as you move on, you are actually using this as a sales generating tool. And if you're not, then it's really time to reconsider, what it is that you're doing with your newsletter, and maybe change things up a little bit. And, there's lots of people out there that are, available to help, consult with folks on, making a better newsletter. So think about that before you completely throw in the towel. And the other thing is unsubscribe rates. If you're getting a lot of high unsubscribe rates, that's something that you may want to look at as well. Why is that? Again, maybe share your current emails with some professionals and see if it might be that your email newsletter isn't matching up with what you do. It may be that your content's boring, wah-wah, or, it could be too much content and people just can't read it all. It could be that you're emailing them too often. So think about that. It could be just your subject line. Okay, so here's some of the, I'm going to go through briefly some of the reports that you can pull up. This is one through Constant Contact. It's great. This is for the University of Maryland Extension Office in Prince George's County, some of our different newsletters. And you can see what a couple of different metrics, for example, our open rates, click-through rates, bounce rates, and unsubscribe rates. So for those of you who really don't have time to get into some of those other metrics, it's nice just to look at this just to see how your newsletters are comparing. For example, I could see that my June newsletter for Farms and Food, I had an open rate of 31%, which is pretty good because the industry average is about 24%, and I had 15% click-throughs. As compared to my July newsletter, which I only had 27% open rate, which is still good, but I only had 8% click-through rate. So those are the kinds of things that you may want to look at, just so you can say, okay, so what did I do differently in newsletter A versus newsletter B? And although that says campaign name, that's not actually the title of my newsletter, just so you know, because that is a very boring title, Farms and Food, July 2017 newsletter. I had something catchier, and I can go back in and read that. That's just what I have for just so I can quickly know which month's newsletter I'm looking at. And you can see, your list growing. You can see the unsubscribe rates, and when your bounce rates start getting high, then it's like, okay, it's time to clean out the newsletter list. So we probably need to do that again. It's been a while. The other thing I wanted to show you is the statistic on top, opens by device, 35% mobile and 65% desktop, which is important. If the desktop number is really high, you don't need to be as focused on the mobile, but I mean, unfortunately, that is the way it's going, for better or for worse. So you really need to make sure that you have a mobile-friendly template. I also wanted to share with you the average MailChimp email campaign stats for the food and agriculture industry. You can see the open rate is 20, and I apologize, it's a little fuzzy, it's 25%, almost 25%. Click-through rate, 2.9%. Soft bounces, 0.58%, hard bounces, 0.43%, and then you have your abuse percentages and unsubscribe rates. So this is something for you to consider or to look at. Constant Contact is the same thing. You know, they all have industries and they have stats, average stats per industry, so you can see how you're measuring up and comparing. Because I will tell you, the first time I sent a newsletter and I saw 30%, that's it, that's all that opened my newsletter, I was completely disheartened. But then when you realize that, you know, the average is 24%, then you're like, I don't feel so bad now. So it's important to look at those rates so you don't get discouraged. All right, just have a few fun examples to share before we wrap up. These are a few newsletters that I subscribe to. The first one is the New Food Economy, the Weekly Dish. They have you know, 2 shorter stories with the read more links. As you can see, they have those nice little teasers, you know, as towns take a crack at regulating their own food, legislators say neighborly trust is the only safety assurance Mainers need. So you're like, okay, let's look at that. And they have a nice caption under that photo that really even gets, you know, even a catchier title. So that's a nice way of doing that. And then they're linking to their blog. And then they have some more news. Again, just slightly longer paragraphs, but still fairly short. They don't have photos for each one just to keep it short. But I do like that they do that. And the other thing you'll notice on the left side is it says if the email is not displaying correctly, you can view it in your browser. And that's really nice too for a couple of reasons. One, sometimes if it's not working properly for folks, they can view it in their browser and it looks much better than their email program. But secondly, it's a great way for them to share it on social media. They can just copy and paste that link anywhere they want. Here's another one, again, Modern Farmer. They always do some interesting titles. I always love their titles. And they just have funny, you know, articles too sometimes. So that's why I chose them. And you can see, again, they have a couple of main blurbs that they're, you know, spitting out, so to speak, speaking of full of spit and vinegar. And then if you look below, then they have some other links to other articles for that particular month. So, you know, I think they're pretty good with this catchy titles, so that's something to consider. And as you see on the right at the bottom, again, you know, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, you know, forward to a friend. This is a very basic newsletter, but I know a lot of people that subscribe to it. This is a more local one, Future Harvest. They do a great job too. Again, just really simple newsletter with nice graphics. So I just wanted to, you know, be sure to share this because this is a nice, you know, local example with a great organization that's in our region. Okay, this one is, I wanted to talk a little about some of the things that, you know, folks who can pay a little bit more money for their newsletter development use. So this is a nice example of an infographic that the Hartman Group put together just on packaging information and what people pay attention to. So that's just, you know, one example of how you might use an infographic. And the one on the left is really fun. That's from West Elm, but you can see they're using this GIF, I always pronounce it incorrectly, to basically display these lamps and to get you to buy the lamps, and it's just really fun how they light up. Now that's a little bit beyond probably what most of us are going to be doing, but I just wanted to share that with you because, you know, it's endless in terms of, you know, what you can do to get folks to really enjoy and subscribe to your newsletter and you know, be engaged. I literally just sat there and looked at that for about a good 5 minutes and just zoned out watching, you know, lights blink. Now I don't know if it necessarily made me go buy a light, but I do like that some of them are on sale. Still a little pricey, but at least they're on sale. The next one, some of you may have seen this before. I'm going to see if this works. Sometimes it doesn't. Let's see if it picks up. Okay. But actually, I'm going to need to pull. I don't know if you guys can hear that. So this is a really nice way to pull together your CSA list. You could just do a simple video and pop that into your newsletter. Don't worry, I won't show the whole thing. You can go back and look at it later, but just wanted to give you guys an idea. Okay. All right. So I am here for any questions that you guys might have about email newsletters. You know, there's a lot more depth we can go into about any one of those particular topics, but I just wanted to give you an overall view of things to consider. And if anyone has any more specific questions, you know, right now, I'm happy to answer them in the chat box. If not, You can also follow up with me via email or phone. I have my contact information there. And also, as part of Extension, we do something called Teaching Effectiveness Forms. And there is a URL at the top, and there's also a QR code. You can take your phone if you feel like doing a Teacher's Effectiveness form for me, and you can scan it on your screen or type in the URL. We always appreciate folks doing that so we know how to make our teaching and our educational programs much better. So with that, I wanted to thank everyone for joining today, and thanks Shannon for inviting me to chat with you guys about email newsletters.